If you want to win in daily fantasy sports, you need to understand who the optimal plays are. And this video will help with that. Here are the must-have players for week 8. Starting with a running back at $6,100, Tony Pollard, who is set up nicely this week. First off, the matchup is great. The Bears rank 29th at stopping the run and allow the 6th most points to the running back position. And you also need to know that Ezekiel Elliott is trending to miss. He has not yet practiced this week, which means that Pollard would be the full-time starter here. And Pollard has played one career game without Ezekiel Elliott, and he took full advantage. Over 31 fantasy points in this game on 18 touches. Now, don't expect 31 fantasy points, but expect a strong performance because Tony Pollard is an elite producer. Right now, he ranks 4th amongst all running backs in yards per touch, 6.2 yards per touch. And if Zeke does indeed miss, his touches are going to come up with that high yards per touch, lots of yardage, lots of points. And because of this, I've actually taken Dak Prescott under 250.5 passing yards. The Cowboys are nearly 10-point favorites here. I think they run the ball a lot in this advantageous matchup with Tony Pollard. I've taken that bet on PricePicks.com, and you can get a free bet if you use the link in the description below with the code SAL22. Use it or lose it. Not now, but right now. Let's stick with the running backs and talk about $7,500 Josh Jacobs, who is too cheap. Yes, $7,500 still too cheap because he currently ranks 1st in opportunity share. 85% of the backfield touches and opportunities in Vegas are going to him. For reference, Jonathan Taylor in his massive year last year only saw 75% of that backfield's touches. That's the upside that we're talking about with Jacobs here. He should be a $9,000 back. And he's been highly efficient. He is number 2 in broken tackles, number 2 in yards created, and this is great because now he's facing a Saints team that can't tackle. They rank 24th in tackling. So those are some RBs. Let's hit up the wide receiver position. Starting with a guy who I believe is too cheap, even though he's $8,500, it's Tyreek Hill, who is an elite play, and here's just how good he's been. Tyreek is earning a target on 36% of his routes run, number 1 in the NFL right now. And he ranks 5th at beating man coverage, and this is massively important because of his matchup this week. Tyreek's going to take on the Detroit Lions, who rank 32nd, dead last in the NFL at coverage, and again, Tyreek is top 5 in the NFL versus coverage. So play Tyreek, and then there's another expensive wide receiver who I'm prioritizing. And yes, he's pricey, but $9,100 Justin Jefferson, who is a 3-point favorite this week, and here's why that's important. In his career as a favorite, Jefferson averages 25 fantasy points per game, over 12 targets per game, and 124 yards per game. That's 45% more points when he's a favorite versus an underdog. And now Jefferson faces the Arizona Cardinals secondary that ranks 30th, 3rd worst in the NFL in coverage. Great spot for the dude. So those are expensive wide receivers. Let's discuss some cheaper ones, and it's $5,300 DJ Moore, who finally came to life last week. You see, he scored about 20 fantasy points on 10 targets, found the end zone for the 2nd time this year, and he had more success because PJ Walker, his quarterback, actually started to play well, and he finally has a good matchup. Because for the last 3 weeks, DJ Moore has been earning targets, but he's been in brutal matchups. See for yourself. He's faced the San Francisco 49ers, the Rams, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, all who have top 10 secondaries and strong cornerbacks against him. But now he finally has a good matchup against the Falcons, who rank 22nd in coverage, but it gets worse for the Falcons. They're down their top 3 cornerbacks and just allowed nearly 500 passing yards last week alone to the Bengals. So DJ Moore is pretty cheap, and he's only coming in at modest ownership, making him a good play according to the DFS blueprint, my 5-step system to help you win more in DFS, to actually stop losing. Yeah, you can get in with thousands of other people using it with the link in the description below. So DJ Moore is a good play, but how about an even cheaper option? $4,300 Noah Brown, who continues to be consistent. You see, the past week, the Cowboys barely threw, and he still earned 7 targets in this game, put up 10 fantasy points, and he's now played 80% of the snaps the past 2 games, even with Michael Gallup out there. He's quietly seeing strong usage and staying on the field in the red zone, especially in the slot where he has an advantage. Consider him. And now this next one completely baffles me. $6,900 Amon-Ra St. Brown, who apparently didn't actually suffer a concussion last week. He had to stay out of the game just in case, but he's good to go. He's going to play this week. Again, he's only $6,900. If we look at what he's done so far this year in 3 healthy games, 9 targets, 12 targets, 12 targets, but then we also go back to last season, his last 9 healthy games, he's averaging 11.1 targets and 24.9 fantasy points. For reference, Cooper Kupp this season is scoring 24.8 fantasy points. So actually, when healthy his last 9 games, he's been better than what Kupp is doing this year. And now he faces the Dolphins, number 28 secondary. This is a good spot. So we talked about one Miami receiver earlier. Let's hit on another. And that's $6,700 Jalen Waddle, who also has that great matchup like his teammate Tyreek Hill against the Detroit Lions, dead last ranked secondary, but more specifically, he'll see the Lions slot cornerback AJ Parker for like a third of this game, who's allowed a 100% catch rate, all 7 targets to be caught this year. And in general, although the Lions give up the 5th most yards after the catch this season. Now that's on a per target basis, and Jalen Waddle ranks 3rd in yards after the catch on 7.6 targets per game this year. You want to play him. So I like Tyreek, I like Waddle. Yeah, that means I'm going to like the quarterback. And that quarterback is Tua, who is only this week $6,200, has that fantastic matchup that we've already been mentioning against the Lions. And this past week, he didn't have the greatest game, but it was still okay. 60% completions, an above average 7.5 yards per attempt, almost posts 300 yards in a bad game with multiple potential interceptions. But for fantasy, it's fine. And the bigger thing here, he has the weapons. You add in Mike Gesicki, the run blocking schemes, good coaching and play calling. This is a great spot for Tua at this price point. I have Tua over 270.5 passing yards. I actually have him pushing towards 300 this week. Again, that's on prizepicks.com, and you get that free bet up to $100 with the code SAL22. The link in the description. Go get it. Not now, but right now. And then consider playing Kirk Cousins this week, because Cousins, like Tua, also has a good matchup and is relatively cheap. A 26-point team total facing Arizona, who has a solid offense with Hopkins back, can maybe force a shootout here. But what we need from Cousins, since he isn't mobile, is a good amount of passing volume. And that shouldn't be an issue, as Cousins is averaging 38 attempts per game this year, and he's only gone under 38 attempts, so meaning basically 40 plus in every game outside of 2 this year, which means there's some stable upside. I want Jefferson, and then my second favorite stacking option would be Adam Thielen, followed by Irv Smith. Now let's go back to the running backs. I'm looking at $7,100 Alvin Kamara, who in my opinion is too cheap, and he'll be lower owned according to the DFS blueprint. Go get it, not now, but right now, so you can actually win more following my 5-step system. Well, he's going to be too low owned because Josh Jacobs is priced right next to him. Even though he's quietly, if we look at his snaps here, in his last 4 games, basically since returning from injury now, he's playing over 70% of the snaps in every single game and averaging 25 opportunities per game. Elite usage. And the expectation is that Andy Dalton is still going to be out there, and he's averaging 8 targets per game when Andy Dalton starts, and over 12 fantasy points just as a receiver, not even on the ground. 12 fantasy points per game alone. That is great. And he now faces the Raiders, who allow the 5th most catches to the running back position. So he's a solid play, and Jamal Williams might be a good GPP play, because if Swift plays, he won't be owned, and if Swift doesn't play, based on what he did last week, he still might not be owned. Even though he saw 16 touches, he only put up 8 points though. The reason why this game was a blowout, he only played 45% of the snaps because the game was a blowout and he came off the field late in the second half. So expect low ownership on Jamal Williams and this next running back, who I really like. That'll be Michael Carter, who will do an even deeper dive on now that Breece Hall is out in the secret email I send out every Friday for free. 5 Secret Friday, link below in the description if you want to get on that newsletter. Well, quite simply, for this week with James Robinson not knowing the playbook, there's a good chance Michael Carter plays 70+% of the snaps in a good matchup against the Patriots, who are ranked 28th at stopping the run. And look, Carter has only seen 86 touches this year, so it's a small sample, but he hasn't been as efficient as last year, but he's still breaking a good amount of tackles. 25 evaded or broken tackles on just 86 touches. And now that he's seeing more usage, expect his 3.5 targets per game to increase to somewhere around 5 per game, which is starting to get to a point where he needs to be started in every fantasy league and even a DFS GPP play. And hey, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to subscribe for more. All right, it's about time we talk about some tight ends. And we could start with Tyler Higbee, who's only $4,200 coming off the bye week, and people are forgetting about this dude. And here's why. He's coming off the bye, so that's one reason people forget about him. But the week before, he played injured. He only saw 2 targets, by far a season low, but he only ran 22 routes. Look at the previous weeks when he's running basically double that, 43 and 39 routes. There's a reason why he ran less. He was injured. But keep in mind, in every healthy game he's played in, he scored over 10 fantasy points and averaged 9.6 targets per game. He was the #1 tight end in usage heading into week 6 before the injury. So play him, and then consider also playing the $3,700 tight end from the Dallas Cowboys in Dalton Schultz, because Dalton Schultz's usage is coming up. When he was injured, he played just 20% of the snaps, but last week 68% of the snaps, 52% of the routes. This is going to continue to come up because earlier this year he's playing on every single snap, 91%, 83%, 100%. So he's going to start to see usage on basically half of the routes run. He saw 5 targets last week. Expect more usage moving forward. He averages over 14 points as a starter. So those are 2 quality plays, 2 of the best plays at the tight end position this week, and this next wide receiver will be massively lower owned. And that is going to be AJ Brown off the bye week. He's expensive. His quarterback is expensive, so it's going to lead to less ownership for the guy, even though he looks great. According to Pro Football Focus, he literally has the #1 matchup on the week against the Pittsburgh Steelers secondary, but more specifically, he'll go into the slot for about a third of this game against Arthur Mallett, who ranks 84th out of 110 graded cornerbacks in coverage. Not good. And then on the outside against Levi Wallace. Levi Wallace is borderline bottom 10 in the NFL in coverage. Great matchups for AJ Brown. And AJ Brown himself has been elite, 2nd at beating man coverage this year, and now he has a good matchup. He's been averaging 8.8 targets per game. So play AJ Brown, and let's start to look for some value pieces. It's a sketchy proposition here, but $5,100 Drake London is hard to ignore. You see, last week he ran 18 routes, which was actually all but one of the dropbacks for Atlanta. So this is technically elite usage. The dude is not leaving leaving the field. But the problem is this team threw just 13 times last week. They're not throwing the ball at all, and that's the concern. This is more so a bet that they actually start to be an NFL team and throw 30 times a game. But the concern is that they're actually favorites this week, so they might not need to throw the ball, and that's the sketchy part here. If they throw the ball 25 plus times, you could expect somewhere around 7 plus targets for Drake London. And maybe a better play for just $200 more is $5,300 Curtis Samuel, who now very quietly in 6 out of 7 games, if you look at his targets here, has 7 or more targets in all but 1 game this year. I mean, this is fantastic usage. And he ranks top 10 in yards after the catch. So if you're seeing volume and you're getting yards after the catch, yeah, it means you have stable production. And if you find the end zone, you have massive upside. He now gets a matchup against the Colts secondary that is below league average, ranking 19th in coverage this year. So you want to play him, but then this next guy is going to be too cheap. DeAndre Hopkins at $7,400 looked fantastic last week. He was the #1 wide receiver in usage. He saw 14 targets on just 26 routes run. This was his best usage since week 1 of 2020, over 2 years ago. And now he faces a Minnesota Vikings secondary that ranks 31st in coverage this year. It's wheels up for Hopkins. Sliding back to the tight end position, we talk about another Atlanta Falcons player, and it's Kyle Pitts, who, believe it or not, saw elite usage last week. 5 targets on 13 overall targets for the team, 38% target share. This would literally rank #1 in the NFL this year. The problem, it was on low volume. Only those 13 passes. It's hard to have lots of upside there, but they tried to get him involved, and they did get him involved. And you can see right here, just those 13 attempts, even though they trailed by 3 touchdowns and 2 touchdowns for most of this game. It's concerning now that they're favorites because they have no incentive to throw if it's a close game or they're leading. Now, a player who is getting a lot of usage and volume is going to be the quarterback Jalen Hurts, the most expensive quarterback on the slate outside of Kyler Murray. He is almost $2,000 more than any other quarterback. We have not seen a difference in pricing like this in a while at the position. And it's hard to say he doesn't deserve it. He obviously has the mobile upside, and if you look at this, he has the 4th best pass blocking advantage this week, positive 27% higher than league average. He's going to have a lot of time to throw and find those running lanes. And not to mention, he'll probably be lower owned because of his price tag, a 27-point team total. He's been highly efficient with now time to throw. I like it. Now, a player who I feel a little bit sketchy about is $5,800 Geno Smith. So since he's been great this year and getting a lot of attention and he's been efficient, I think he'll be over-owned in DFS, but here's my concern. He's only thrown the ball about 30 times per game this year, and over his last 3 games, thrown the ball just 27 times per game. Like Russell Wilson, when he was in Seattle, he has to be really efficient to have a monster 30-plus point fantasy day to win a GPP. And the Seattle team wants to run the ball with Kenneth Walker, who looks absolutely insane. And the New York Giants rank 30th in run defense. So without DK Metcalf, you might as well just hand it off more to Kenneth Walker. And speaking of Kenneth Walker, let's hop back into the running backs. $6,400 Ramondre Stevenson is way too cheap. Now, there are some potential concerns, but let's talk about the positives. With Damian Harris back in his last game, he sees 19 touches, catches all 8 passes, and goes for over 20 fantasy points, finding the end zone yet again in this game. And now Ramondre is going to face the Jets tackling defense that ranks bottom half of the league in tackling, and this matters because Stevenson himself is top 3 in broken tackles. Now, there's a chance Damian Harris sees more usage if he's going to get healthier, but keep in mind, he practiced in full last week. Apparently, he was fully healthy, and this was the role they gave Ramondre. So consider Ramondre a great play, borderline top 5 running back this week, and same can be said for this next rookie. We kind of already touched on him, but eventually Kenneth Walker is going to be a $7,500 plus running back, so you might as well get in on him before that happens, because for that to happen, he has to have a big week this week. Like we said, he's facing the Giants' number 30th run defense, and Walker has earned, as a starter now, 23 touches on average. And with those touches, he's broken the most tackles the last 2 weeks in the NFL. He's seen the most rushing yards and the 2nd most RB usage, only behind Saquon Barkley. And it gets even better because he was used in the 2-minute drill offense last week, showing that they really trust him, and this opens up opportunity for more pass catching work. So consider Walker, and then this next veteran is a solid cheap RB. So on this slate, there's not a ton of dirt cheap RBs. We talked about Michael Carter, and at the same price, you have Raheem Mostert, who now has 60% or more snaps in 5 straight games. He's the clear RB1 here. And now he faces the Detroit Lions, who rank 23rd in run defense and allow the 5th most points to the running back position. And this week, Mostert is a 3-point favorite with a 27-point team total, tied for that 2nd highest team total on the slate. This matters because in similar situations in his career, he's averaging 15.7 fantasy points in these types of game environments, which is basically top 10 running back production. So play Mostert and then this rookie wide receiver who has all the upside in the world. And that would be $6,000 flat Chris Olave. Now, this is something interesting here. When you're $6,000 flat, it is not a perceived, it's a psychological thing from humans. It's not like you're getting a discount. It's not $5,900. So at 6K flat, people normally don't own you as much as they should. Even if he picks up 12% ownership or so in the DFS blueprint, it should be higher. Because Olave has all the upside in the world, leading the NFL with 18 deep targets of 20 plus yards, even though he's missed a game and a half this year. And now he's played in 4 completed games, and this is how it's gone. In 4 completed games as a starter, he's averaged 11.8 targets per game and 17.3 fantasy points per game with multiple different quarterbacks. He now gets a matchup against the Raiders secondary that has given up the 4th most deep passes this year, right up Olave's alley. So Olave's a solid play. Let's see if we can find another tight end option. And if you're really looking to punt the position, I think $2,800 Noah Fant is at least in play because he's getting some usage in what is a good offense. He's seeing 18 routes run per game, and he has 4 red zone zone targets this year, it seems like he's getting a little bit more involved, and without DK Metcalf, you could expect the need for him to be involved. So consider Noah Fant and that DFS blueprint that we've talked about. And the DFS blueprint is a 5-step system that is broken down into these 7 tools that you get weekly to help you win more in DFS, because I know you're probably just continuously depositing and you're getting frustrated. This will help you actually win more while doing less work. Trust me, there's 1,000+ people using it right now, and I have been using it for a reason. Check it out, link down below. And you also want to check out this next tight end. Pause. And that would be Dallas Goedert, who is $5,000 flat. You might get a nice little ownership discount here since he's at that flat price principle that we talk about. And look, he has a strong matchup against Pittsburgh, who is allowing a 75% catch rate to tight ends. And if he's going to catch a lot of his targets this week, it's great because he ranks number 1 in yards after the catch. More easy production for Goedert, who is yet again the number 1 tight end in terms of how valuable his targets are downfield. So Goedert's a solid play, and so is this quarterback. Now, I truly believe $7,500 Kyler Murray will be forgotten about this week. For starters, he only has a 22.5 point team total. So based on that, he should probably be honestly priced at like $6,000 flat, considering the other quarterbacks on the slate have higher team totals and are cheaper. But because of his price tag, people are either going to pay all the way up for Jalen Hurts or go down to the Tua range, the Matt Staffy range, the Geno Smith range. And because of that, you're going to get low ownership. You'll get low ownership on a guy who now has Hopkins back, who's going to have Robbie Anderson play a little bit more this week. Maybe James Conner returns. And yes, he has his own mobile upside still. Plus, he has a matchup against the Minnesota Vikings that can turn into a shootout because both of these secondaries rank bottom 3 in the NFL. So I think Kyler Murray is a sneaky play here. Yes, he doesn't look like an optimal play, but lower ownership makes him more appealing. Now, this next wide receiver probably won't have lower ownership, but at $6,500, he's definitely in play because of this elite matchup that he has against the Giants, and that's Tyler Lockett. The Giants rank 29th in coverage. And the good news for Lockett is he ranks number 10 at actually beating man coverage this year, so it's a fantastic spot for Lockett, but that's not all. DK is likely to miss this week, and Lockett's already averaging 7 targets per game. It doesn't mean he's going to start averaging 12 targets per game, but you would expect them to try and prioritize him more in the offense. And Lockett ranks 8th in the NFL in deep targets, seeing downfield usage, and the Giants, their secondary gives up the 3rd most deep receptions this season. So this top 10 matchup is worth playing this week. And I hope and believe that this was also worth your time this week, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you want to get that DFS blueprint to increase your chances even further of winning, click the link in the description to learn more. Best of luck this week, and I'll see you all in the next one.